Hello, class. Welcome to this chapter 5 lecture video. Hope I sound enthusiastic enough. I'm having a rough time getting going this morning before I left the office down there. I said, hey, you better sound more excited in your video because accounting is boring enough. Don't make it any worse. So let's try to, hopefully I can keep things lively today. Keep you entertained. We're going to go through chapter 5, activity-based costing. It's a fairly short chapter. If you've looked at the PowerPoint, there are only 23 slides. Activity-based costing is basically, we did job costing in chapter 4. Well, activity-based costing is a type of job costing system. Okay, so we're still doing the same thing. We're taking our direct materials, our direct labor, and our manufacturing overhead, and we're assigning it to a product. Okay, we are still going to use a normal costing system where we're using a predetermined overhead rate. Okay, we're going to mix up the names a little bit when we get it going through this chapter, but it's still going to be the same process. Okay, only now we're going to apply overhead multiple times based on activity. In chapter 4, we did it one time with a plant, an overall plant rate. And then we did sometimes we had to maybe do it 2 times or 3 times if we had departments. Okay, but now we're gonna have to do it multiple times, and instead of based on departments, we're going to do it by activity. I better share my screen here. Okay, because plant-wide and departmental rates, if you base them on direct labor hours, machine hours, stuff like this, it's not going to catch exactly how costs are split up, because costs are split up in many, many different ways. So it has some limitations. Okay. And when you don't have a good pricing system, here's just some of the stuff that can, put pressure on your company. Okay. If you're not setting, if you don't have a good costing system, you're not setting your profits right. Maybe you're losing out on sales to competitors. You're having too small profit margins. Okay, in a very competitive environment, you need to be as accurate as possible with your costing. The 2 major factors here are non-unit related overhead, as we're going to see here in a little bit. There's overhead costs that you can relate kind of directly to the unit, and then there's kind of factory-wide overhead, or maybe stuff that doesn't happen to every unit, and it just depends on other things. Okay, and when the product diversity is great. Yeah, if you're trying to just do everything off machine hours and maybe one, doesn't take into account moving the product around, storing the product, okay, inspecting the product. All these different types of things may take different amounts of times, different amounts of cost for different types of products. Okay. So non-unit related overhead, we have 4 different types of kind of levels where we can categorize costs into. Now, this is important to know. So the unit level, your cost driver is going to vary with output. This is indirect materials. Okay. And here's their examples, the cost for labeling each bottles of Victoria's Secret. So the more bottles that are produced and sold, the more labels, the more indirect material, the higher that overhead cost is going to be. Maybe paint would be another thing like that. Batch level varies with the number of batches produced. Okay, so let's go use that Victoria's Secret perfume. So maybe we're making a certain type of perfume in our machines, and we have to get that machine set up. We need to do some cleaning inside there. We need to make sure everything's lubed up. We need to move the setup equipment around, make sure it's all set to the right size, to make sure everything's just perfect. And we got to set up everything to make this batch a product. Okay, that is a batch level cost. Okay, a product sustaining cost is actually like taking care of the inventory, moving it around after it's produced. Is it small like the Victoria's Secret bottles where we can pack a whole bunch of them in? We only got to take 1 load. Now maybe we're making a bigger product that's 3 feet by 3 feet, and we got to take 3 times as many loads just to move as many product. Takes up twice as much warehouse space. Okay, that's kind of product sustaining costs. And then facility sustaining. Okay, he has here the plant manager salary, yes, the one that's overlooking the whole factory, the factory mortgage and stuff like that. So it's important that we kind of get these spread out evenly. When we're doing the whole plant wide and stuff, as the slide said before, we're kind of focused just on those unit level costs. Okay, maybe we can base stuff on machine hours. And that's good for how much we're producing. Okay, but maybe something we're producing, and like I said, is different, varies different in size. Okay, so that product sustaining costs are different. And the amount of time it takes to inspect, the amount of time it takes to move the inventory around. Okay, maybe the ones that are smaller, it takes, we have to set up and get the equipment, we have to set it up more often. Okay, we have to do more setups, we gotta produce it more often. Okay, so it takes more of that cost. ABC is just gonna help you spread those costs out a little bit better. Without ABC, you're gonna get some distorted product costs. Okay, product diversity is what's really leads to this. Okay, if the more differential products you produce, the more need you'll have to use ABC costing. The consumption ratio kind of explains this. Okay, and if you're looking at your chapter 5 outline, we're getting into kind of the heart of what we're going to do here. Okay, this is kind of step 1. When we go to do ABC costing, the first step we need to do is determine how many activities we have and estimate their usage in production. Okay, so this is what we're looking at. We're looking at our activity drivers here. Okay, we want to find out how many basic activities do we have and how are they used. So here's some information we have here for Rio Novo's Portobello plant. We're going to use this example throughout this whole slideshow. Okay, so if you're taking notes, you can just keep writing it down. We're going to constantly kind of refer back to some of these things. Okay, so here we have some deluxe chairs, we're going to call them chairs, and some regular chairs, and a total. So we have different amount of units produced. Prime costs, if you remember, prime costs are our direct materials and our direct labor. Okay. So it gives us that, the materials and the labor, because remember, we are doing job costing. It's direct materials plus direct labor plus the overhead. And then we have some different things here. We have direct labor hours, machine hours, setup hours, and number of moves. Okay. These are all going to be our activity drivers for what kind of activities do we have? Here is our activities: setting up equipment, moving goods, machining, and assembly. Okay, so we have 4 activities here. The labor hours, the machine hours, the setup hours, and the number of moves, those are called our activity drivers. Okay, we need to estimate how much under each activity is going to be used. So here we get here for under assembly for direct labor hours. Okay, 20 for the deluxe, 80 for the regular. So if we're talking about a consumption ratio, we would want to know that in a percent or decimal. So it's 0.8 to 0.2. As far as assembly goes, usage takes up 80% of the cost, while the deluxe takes up 20% of the cost. Okay, because of the machine hours, you see there's 50. The regular uses 40 of the 50 hours, or 80%, whereas 20% is used by the deluxe. So that is calculating your consumption ratios. That is determining how many activities you have, what their activity drivers are, okay, and how they're being used in production. The second step is to assign costs to the activities, which is what we're doing here. Okay, we're saying this is for setting up equipment. The total cost for the whole plant wide is $1,000. For moving goods, it's $1,000. For machining, it's $1,500. For assembly, it's $500. Our total overhead cost $4,000. So it says here, calculate the consumption ratios. You have to go back to the first slide, but here's kind of what I was saying under assembly. It was 80%, 0.8, 0.2 for machining. I think the other one we did was this one. The machining was 80% here, 20% here. You can refer back to that slide. Okay, we're just figuring out what percent or decimal. Okay, you can turn that into percent. It should equal 100%. All right. So the next thing we need to calculate, now that we have determined how many activities we have and estimated how much they're going to be used. Okay, so that's kind of step one. Step two is we assign cost to activities. We did that on that slide. Okay, step three now is to find the activity rates. Okay, so when we're talking about assembly and it was labor hours, we're going to find out how much is this going to cost per labor hours. Okay, when it was, forget what it is, but one of them was number of setup hours. Okay, so we're going to go through and we're going to find out how much does it cost per setup hour. Each activity has its own activity rate. Okay, so the setting up equipment, we assigned a cost to it of $1,000. We estimated that the setup hours were going to be 4. Okay, you'd have to go back to that other slide, and those would have been the regular and the deluxe added together. The total number that we expected, you know, the total number of setup hours we expected to use here. For moving goods, we assigned a cost of $1,000 and we estimated 10 moves total. Machining 1,500 with 50 and assembly. So we're just going to take our cost and divide by our total quantity here. And we get our activity rates. 250 per setup hour, 100 per move, 30 per machine hour. Once we have those, then we need to take those activity rates and assign them to the product. So if we're looking at deluxe here, here's back to our original thing here. Now we have another category over here. Remember, it was $250 per setup hours. So when we get here, our deluxe, we're going to assign cost. For the deluxe, it's going to be 3 setup hours times 250. So they're going to get 750 of this cost, and they're going to get 250. And if you remember, the total there was $8,000. There was $8,000 total when moving. The deluxe had 6 moves, whereas the regular had 4 moves. Machining, as you can see, it kind of flips around. The regular took a lot more machining, it gets a lot more cost assigned to it there. In the assembly, so what we're doing here, we're just taking our activity rates and multiplying it by the actual usage for each product. Add the prime cost to it to get its total manufacturing cost. Divide by the units produced to get you a total unit cost. Okay, so if you got through chapter 4 and you understood it, okay, a plant-wide rate based on direct labor hours, you know, we would calculate it as this. When we're doing ABC costing, we're just extending that out a little bit further. We're assigning to activities, adding a few more into it, but it's not a real hard process. It's just doing the same thing as chapter 4. The main thing in reality, this is a cost benefit analysis type of thing, okay? Of course, it takes a little bit more work to do ABC costing. There's more you got to track. You got to break down your costs a little bit further, so you got to do a little bit more work there. Is it going to be worth the benefit? Kind of depends on your industry, as that one slide was showing. Is it really competitive? Do you really need to know your cost down to the exact penny? Are you losing sales because maybe you're 10, 15 cents off on your costing? Okay, those are the type of things. Is it going to provide that benefit for you? Or is using the plant-wide rate, does that satisfy your business needs? These are all job costing methods. They're all approved. The main thing is we have to get all of those product costs, that direct material, direct labor, and that overhead as a product cost into our inventory and eventually expensed as cost of good sold. Okay. So that's all we got for chapter 5. for the outline part of it, I'm gonna have one more video for you in this chapter where I got 2 questions here in the chapter 5 handout. Okay, and that'll finish up unit 1, and you'll be ready for that unit 1 exam. As always, reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm here for you. Best of luck.